The red emergency light pulsed erratically across the high, arched ceiling of the Zamara Secondary Station's lecture hall. Miss Riki Zamara paused at the threshold, her long fronds quivering in irritation as the alarm's klaxon echoed through the rows of expectant students. The sleek metal benches, bolted to the gravity-stabilized floor, rattled softly beneath their weight. A faint metallic odor hung in the air, tainted by the antiseptic tang of the station's climate controls. "Settle down, class," Miss Riki called, her voice firm but tired. 24 pairs of slit pupils turned toward her, narrowing in skepticism. Among them, Yura Vex dipped her chin and smirked behind a slim obsidian visor. Jean Mirek, the triangular, headed djinn, crouched at the rear, shoulders hunched, fingers dancing along the edge of her digital stylus. Carrick Talos, the fur-manned Carrick, leaned forward, arms crossed, hiding a tremor in his large claws. Saran Ipel sat near the front, adjusting microlenses over her scarlet eyes, already analyzing every flicker of light. Miss Riki drew in a steady breath. Her duty mantle, clinking strands of ceremonial beads, shifted as she brushed one broad claw against the lectern. "Today," she began, voice steady, "we continue our study of Earth. But first, a communication from the Council." She tapped a slender frond against the control pad, and the central display sprang to life. Rows of blue, white text scrolled up as Counselor Than's official insignia bloomed in the corner. In an instant, the hall's atmosphere shifted. A cold hush fell over the students. Jean Mirek's stylus clattered to the floor. Miss Riki's muzzle tightened. "Session override by Counselor Than." The screen announced in stark, unblinking letters. Miss Riki's heart clenched. She had expected resistance, rumors that the Council doubted her Earth program. But she had fought tirelessly to preserve this class. A wave of indignation surged through her, simultaneously fear and defiance. "You are dismissed," she said with unnatural calm, turning away from the display. But her students barely moved. Yura Vex snapped upright. "Miss Riki," she challenged, voice loud enough to echo off the hull plating. "Why does the Council keep meddling in our education? Do they fear the truth about Earth?" Miss Riki froze, fronds bristling. The jagged edge of the override notice glowed behind her. A memory flickered. The day her first cadre of cadets returned from Earth, shell-shocked, some broken in mind and body. The Council had convened and quietly stripped her of command, only for public outcry from human diplomats to force her reinstatement. Since then, suspicion had shadowed every lesson she taught. Choosing her words carefully, she turned back. "Because knowledge of Earth is dangerous," she said softly, but her claw tapped the lectern with authority. "And the Council must ensure it is delivered responsibly." Now, we were discussing human tactics. "But humans can't be that fearsome," Carrick Talos interjected, rising to his talents. "We see hollow broadcasts of their celebrations, their diplomacy. They're charming." A ripple of agreement passed through the class. Jean Mirek's fronds trembled as she pressed both hands to her chest. I want to believe they're better than the predators we hear about," she whispered. Miss Riki recalled the image of the grizzly bear on her datapad, its massive paws dug into loam, claws gleaming like spears. The choking memory of her first encounter on Earth, flashes of crimson in the forest dusk, made her throat constrict. "They can be charming," she admitted. "But remember, every charm hides a razor's edge. We will not abandon caution." Yura snorted, but curiosity flared in her eyes. "Then show us," she demanded. "Show us the razor's edge." Miss Riki pressed a frond to the lectern and swiped. The display shifted, an image of a snarling, iron-clawed creature emerging from forest shadows. "Tomorrow," Miss Riki announced, voice low yet resonant, "we will delve into Earth's predators, and why our Confederation must never underestimate them." The override notice blinked one final time, then vanished. But its threat lingered in the charged silence. As the students filed out, Miss Riki stood motionless beneath the fading red glow. A single thought echoed through her mind. The Council's meddling would not break her resolve. If anything, it steeled her determination to prove that the knowledge of Earth, dangerous as it might be, was too vital to be silenced. Outside the hall, drills echoed through the station corridors. Yet Miss Riki's footsteps remained sure and unhurried. Tomorrow, she vowed, would be the day the students truly saw Earth and understood the razor's edge that balanced between fear and awe. The moment Miss Riki stepped away, the classroom's gravity field spasmed. One instant, grav panels hummed softly. The next, every body was slammed into the padded floor as though pulled by a titan's fist. Vex cried out, limbs locked in crushing weight, teeth gritting. Talos' claws gouged furrows in the carpeting. His roar of pain cut through the alarm's wail. Jean Mirick's triangular skull thudded against the bench behind her, and her stylus skittered away across the tile. Heat rushed into Miss Riki's cheeks as she leapt back to the lectern. "Emergency gravity leak," she barked, voice stretched thin by the roaring in her ears. White smoke hissed from vents along the walls, carrying the acrid stench of superheated metal. Red lights flickered, the alarms shrieked. The once stable floor plates buckled under pressure. A flicker of movement at the back caught her eye, Jean desperately clawing at her belt to release her data slates. Miss Riki forced her fronds to calm, each quivering filament trembling with contained fury. She slammed a claw into the console and tapped a sequence. Override stabilizers. Sparks showered around her as the gravity system ratcheted down, but the field only shuddered, settling at twice normal pull. Students groaned, faces contorted in agony. Even with her advanced training, Miss Riki felt her own tendrils quiver under the strain. Taking a breath, she activated her personal HoloLink. A crackle, then Dr. Kieran Holt's calm face filled the display. His blue-white uniform was smeared with grease and oil. He'd just crawled out from the station's service ducts. "I see the anomaly," he said, voice steady. "There's a sabotage override in your subsystem controls. Someone's planted a phantom feedback loop." Miss Riki's heart thundered. "Identify the source. I need manual access." Holt's fingers danced across his panel, patching a backdoor. "Brace yourselves." His image wavered as he rerouted power through auxiliary channels. Slowly, the roar in the vents eased, and the floor's oppressive gravity lightened to normal. Students sagged, gasping for breath, fur rippling and tails drooping. Carrick lay still, shaking. Jean pressed her palm to her forehead, eyes wide with shock. Miss Riki surveyed them all. "Stand up," she commanded, voice low but unwavering. "Check each other for injuries. We will continue when everyone is stable." Vex pushed herself upright, breathing hard. "Who would do this?" she rasped, anger flashing in her obsidian eyes. Miss Riki glanced at the control pad where faint misuse codes winked mockingly. "Someone who doesn't want us to learn the truth," she answered. "And they're closer than we thought." As medbots wheeled past to tend to Carrick's sprained limbs, Jean Mirick's comm badge emitted a soft chime. She flicked it on, and a single line scrolled across the dark screen. "You are to be removed from Earth program." Her slender jaw clenched. She met Miss Riki's gaze, fear and determination dancing in her coral-tinted eyes. Miss Riki closed her pupils around Jin's trembling form and nodded. Tomorrow's lesson would not only expose Earth's dangers, but also the conspirators within their own ranks. And this time, nothing, not gravity leaks nor council edicts, would silence the truth. Miss Riki stood before her students in the aftermath of the gravity breach, the low hum of medbots echoing down the corridor behind them. Faces still bruised by sudden strain, they watched her with a mixture of fear and curiosity. Saran Ipel lifted her paw to silence the worried whispers. When she spoke, her voice was soft but carried every ounce of the determination that had driven her here. "I owe you all the truth," she said, scanning the row of slit-pupiled students. "Not just about Earth's dangers, but about my own past there." She raised a trembling claw and summoned a hollow projector. A wavering image appeared, a dense, moonlit forest on Earth, where shadows twisted like living creatures. "This was my first mission," Miss Riki began, tone heavy. "I led a small team of explorers. Optison, Ural, Jin, all of them counted on my guidance. We mapped uncharted territory, recorded every data point." She paused, eyes darkening at the memory. But someone betrayed us. The students leaned forward. Even the usually cynical Yura Vex, her armored plating dimmed by fatigue, seemed caught off guard. Jean Mirik's triangular head tilted sideways, every frond quivering. My second-in-command was Opticin, Ventorin, Miss Riki continued. He was my friend, or so I believed. But when we encountered a pack of skinwalkers, ancient predators we had no right to awaken, tore and sabotaged our grav field generator. I watched our ship's landing pad collapse. You saw our gravity loop today. His betrayal was far worse. 3 lives lost, all because he wanted to prove his worth to the council. A hush fell over the hall. Carrick Talos' ears flattened against his head. Saran clutched her data slates to her chest. Jin's stylus fell to the deck with a sharp click. I carried guilt for years, Miss Riki admitted, voice breaking. I blamed myself for trusting him. But when I returned to the station, I uncovered the council's secret orders. Project Exterminate Humanity. Torin did not act alone. His actions were encouraged. Murmurs rose. Yora's obsidian eyes flickered with anger and disbelief. They used you, and us, she said, voice cracking. Miss Riki nodded, tears collecting at the corners of her bright yellow lips. Yes, and that is why our study matters. We cannot be pawns in a game that fears knowledge. Jean Mirik stepped forward, her fronds trembling but resolute. We stand with you, Miss Riki, she declared. They will not scare us away. In that moment, a hidden console blinked behind a nearby panel, unnoticed by the class. Within the council's secure chamber, Counselor Than watched the hollow feed, lips curling in a satisfied smile. Very good, he whispered. They rally around her. Soon, we will remove that loyalty and silence the Earth program for good. Back in the lecture hall, Miss Riki exhaled, gathering her robes. Her resolve shone brighter than any council edict. Tomorrow, they would confront Earth's predators together. But tonight, they had already faced their greatest foe and refused to bow. Saran Eipel's heart raced as the classroom lights dimmed and the holoscreen hummed to life. The floor panel slid aside, revealing a circular pit edged with cushioned ramps. Welcome to Earth's predator simulation, Miss Riki announced, voice calm but firm. Saran adjusted her microlenses and stepped forward, already noting tiny code flickers in the projection's data stream. A low growl echoed through the chamber. The holographic forest materialized in swirling mist, gnarled trunks, moonlit ferns, and shadows that shifted with uncanny realism. Saran felt the synthetic breeze caress her fur and smelled the bite of digital gunpowder in the air. She swallowed hard. This was more immersive than any training module she'd ever seen. Stay within the light perimeter, Miss Riki instructed. Identify the threat and neutralize it. Saran took a cautious step. Across the pit, Yura Vex armored plating glowed faintly. Yura raised a scanner rifle, smirking over her obsidian visor. Jean Mirik hovered near the rear, triangular head tilting as she clutched her stylus like a lifeline. Carrick Talos flexed his claws, eager for a fight. Without warning, a lupin silhouette burst from the underbrush, teeth bared and jaws snapping. Its holographic fur bristled as it lunged. Yura fired a burst of stun darts, only to see them sputter and vanish midair. The wolf's growl deepened, reverberating through the floor. Saran, the diagnostic logs. Jean cried. Something's wrong with the calibration. Saran jogged to the control console embedded in the ramp's edge. Fingers flicking over hollow keys, she accessed hidden subroutines. Lines of code scrolled too fast to read, but one sequence stood out. An unauthorized override loop forcing the simulation into maximum aggression. Her pulse pounded. The wolf snapped at Yura's ankle. She screamed as claws raked her plating, sparks flying. Jean darted forward, pressing her stylus to Yura's cuff, a makeshift EMP pulse that short-circuited the wolf's proximity sensors. The creature froze mid-leap, then collapsed into a harmless projection. Enough, Miss Riki commanded, round fronds quivering with controlled fury. Emergency shutdown. But the holoscreen flickered red. Alarm screamed. The forest vanished, replaced by a stark warning. Infinite loop detected. The perimeter lights blinked off, and the cushioned ramps retracted, leaving the students stranded on narrow ledges above the dark pit. Carrick's roar of frustration shook the metal walls. Jean scrambled to Saran's side. "How do we override it?" she gasped. Saran's claws trembled as she accessed the console again. "The override key is locked behind council-level encryption," she said, voice tight. "We need Miss Riki's command code." A crackling voice echoed through the comlink. "Dr. Holt, I'm rerouting power to your auxiliary console. You'll have 15 seconds before containment protocols lock you out entirely." Miss Riki's image materialized in a side hollow panel. Her bright yellow lips set in a grim line. "Find the subroutine labeled Torin_sabotage. Erase it. Now." The pit below them pulsed with shadow, as though something else had stepped into the loop. Something ancient and hungry. Saran swallowed, fingers dancing across the panel. The infinite loop warning flashed faster, each pulse echoing like a heartbeat. "Almost there," Saran breathed. But as her claw hovered over the final command, the console locked with a cold click. The ledges trembled. A growl deeper than any hollow sound rippled from the dark. "Hold on," Miss Riki said, voice distant. "We fight together." Above the pit, the students exchanged resolute glances. Somewhere deep in the simulation, a real predator stirred, and their next move would determine whether they survived this lesson or became its prey. Dr. Kieran Holt's quarters were dim when the encrypted comlink chimed insistently. He wiped grease from his hands on a rag and flipped the screen upright. The seal of Earth Command glowed red against the darkness. Holt's throat tightened as he read the directive. Immediate suspension of Earth program. All liaison operations are to cease until further notice. His heart pounded. He'd known the Council's sabotage ran deep, but an order from Earth itself? He forced himself to breathe slowly, recalling the images of his students struggling under doubled gravity and the betrayal that haunted Riki. She needed support, now more than ever. Holt keyed the station's shuttle channel, every vibration of the hull echoing his urgency. Within minutes, he was hurtling through the zero-G transit tubes toward the hab levels, the loop rails tugging him forward. The air grew warmer as he approached Riki's unit, the door's biometric reader clicking open at his approach. Miss Riki stood in the small kitchen, the last rays of artificial sun slipping through the port window. She looked up, exhaustion and relief warring in her golden eyes. "You got it," she said quietly. He crossed the room, voice low but fierce. "They've ordered the program shut down," he announced. "Your lessons, the simulations, they want it gone." Her fronds drooped, then stiffened as she sank into a stool. "They've already cost us too much," she whispered. "Not just lives, but trust." He knelt beside her. "We have to expose them, Counselor Than and his cabal. They're behind the sabotage and the override orders." He pulled a data chip from his pocket. Jean and Carrick retrieved this from the central archive. It's labeled Project Exterminate Humanity. Riki's claws flicked as she took it, eyes widening at the weight of the words. They plan to eradicate humans and erase the evidence of our alliance. A flat knock sounded at the door. Holt's jaw clenched. "They're already here." Outside, 2 armored guards blocked the corridor. Their helmets gleamed, badges marking them as the station security council's elite, Than's hand-picked enforcers. Holt stood, moving in front of Riki. "We need a plan," he hissed. "If they confiscate that chip, we lose our proof." Riki rose, folding her wings of robes around her. "We hide it in the simulation core. They'll never think to look there." Holt's comm badge crackled. Jin's voice, urgent. "Dr. Holt, Carrick and I. Security is swarming the archive. We barely escaped." Riki's jaw set. "We're not running. Bring them here." Holt pressed a palm to the console, locking the door. The guards pounded, voices demanding entry. He glanced at Riki. "Ready?" She nodded. Her fronds bristled with anger and determination. "Let them in." When the hatch hissed open, 2 guards stepped inside, weapons trained. Holt raised his hands, his voice calm but resolute. "By order of Earth Command, you cannot shut down this program. We have proof of Counselor Than's crimes." The lead guard's visor reflected the Project Exterminate chip in Riki's claws. For a heartbeat, everything stilled. Then he barked, "You are under arrest." Riki's eyes flashed. "Try it," she said low, "and you'll answer to every civilized race we've taught." Silence fell as the guards hesitated, caught between orders from above and the fury in Riki's stare. Outside, Jean and Carrick slipped through the corridor's shadows, clutching extra data drives. They paused at the door, watching as the battle for truth and for the Earth program's survival ignited in that tiny hab unit high above the planet they both feared and loved. The council chamber's grand doors slid open with a resonant hiss, and Miss Riki Zamara was escorted in, flanked by Dr. Kieran Holt and her three most trusted students, Vex, Jean Myrick, and Carrick Talos. The vaulted ceiling arched overhead, crystalline lights reflecting off polished obsidian tables. Every eye in the semicircle of stern-faced counselors fell on the small delegation from the secondary station. Counselor Thin rose from his high-backed chair, his scaled brows arching with practiced authority. "Miss Riki," he intoned, voice ringing through the hall, "you and your accomplices stand accused of defying direct orders from Earth Command and sabotaging station systems. We demand explanation." He flicked a claw toward a hovering holoscreen. It bloomed into life, displaying the words "Project Exterminate Humanity" alongside encoded directives intercepted from the station's archives. A collective gasp echoed in the chamber. Carrick's ears flattened, Jin's fronds trembled, even Holt's steady gaze flickered. Miss Riki stepped forward, tail swishing deliberately. "Those orders were never ratified by the Confederation," she declared. "They were forged by council factions who fear the truths I teach. This program saves lives by preparing every race for Earth's reality." Counselor Thin narrowed his slit pupils. "Your claim is unsubstantiated." He tapped a panel. The holo shifted to show footage of the gravity leak in her classroom, the Predator simulation gone awry, and encrypted comm logs bearing Holt's signature. "You manipulated these incidents to prove a conspiracy that does not exist." Vex sprang to her feet, armor plating rattling. "That conspiracy saved us from a greater threat," she snapped. "We experienced the sabotage firsthand. Miss Riki taught us to survive, to stand together, because someone in this very chamber sought to drown humanity in oblivion." Her voice echoed so powerfully that the crystal lanterns above trembled. A hush fell. Several counselors exchanged uneasy glances. Than's lip curled. "Silence," he barked. At his gesture, two guards in black ceramite armor advanced, weapons raised. "By council decree, you are to be detained pending full inquiry." Dr. Holt moved in front of Riki and the students. His usually calm blue eyes flashed. "You will not intimidate us with phasers," he said quietly. Before anyone could react, a subtle vibration emanated from his chest, a low hum of psionic energy. The guards staggered as though caught in a shockwave, weapons clattering harmlessly to the floor. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. Counselors backed away, shields raised. Than's mouth opened in fury, but he paused, uncertain. Holt's pulse of sixth sense, an ancient human gift, had disrupted the guard's neural circuits just long enough to break the arrest. Miss Riki seized the moment. "Look at them," she said, gesturing to the incapacitated guards. "If humans were expendable, would we have programs to preserve their lives? Or would we let their stars dim without protest?" Carrick Talos' deep roar of agreement shook the marble floor, and Jean Myrick's stylus glowed with renewed resolve. The chamber's lights flickered as auxiliary systems powered down. Counselor Than's holoscreen sputtered. "Security lockdown initiated," a disembodied voice intoned. Doors slid shut. The crystal windows dimmed to gray. Vex glanced at Holt. "What now?" she asked, voice low. Holt's sixth sense prickled, mapping hidden energies in the room. "We hold them here," he replied, "until every counselor demands the truth." He caught Miss Riki's eye, and she nodded, determination blazing between them. As the echoes of clattering armor faded, the chamber settled into tense silence. The conspirators had gambled and lost their advantage, yet outside, reinforcements would soon arrive. The next move would decide not only the fate of the Earth program, but the fragile alliance between species. And for the first time, both teacher and students stood united against the galaxy's most powerful tribunal. The shuttle's engines roared as it pierced Earth's upper atmosphere, rattling every panel and sending cold sweat trickling down the backs of Yora's armored plating. Through the viewport, the planet's blue-green curve glowed against the black void. Jean Merrick pressed her triangular head against the window's edge, Franz trembling with awe and apprehension. Carrick Talos gripped the seat restraints so tightly his claws dug into the padding. Saran Eipel toggled her microlenses, scanning for landing zones among swirling cloud banks. Dr. Holt's voice crackled over the comlink, steady despite the turbulence. Brace for heavy deceleration. Gravity fields are recalibrating to Earth norms. He flicked a switch at the pilot's console, and the shuttle lurched downward, plunging through layers of storm to a forested plain below. When they emerged into clear air, the shuttle shuddered to a jarring halt on 3 spindly landing struts. The doors hissed open, and a blast of humid, earthy scent rolled in. Damp leaves, rich soil, something wild and untamed. Jean inhaled sharply, her scales bristling at the unfamiliar fragrance. Yora shivered, though it was not cold. Miss Riki ushered them out, voice hushed with reverence. "This is our staging ground, a redwood grove in the Pacific Northwest. We have 3 days to gather data and prove our program's value." She set her data slate to record every flicker of sunlight on fern and moss captured in high resolution. Within minutes, they had fashioned a crude shelter from fallen branches and woven vines. Carrick volunteered to scout for edible plants, his fur shimmering as he navigated through underbrush. Jean and Saran collected water samples from a nearby stream, marveling at the clarity and the faint swirl of microorganisms dancing at the surface. Night fell suddenly, the sky erupting with pinpricks of starlight. Then came the distant howl, low, mournful, carrying through the stillness like a warning. Yora's visor dimmed instantly. "Wolves," she murmured, blood pounding in her ears. A pack of 6 emerged into their clearing moments later, lean silhouettes outlined by moonlight. Eyes glinting amber, they advanced with silent grace. Carrick stepped forward, muscles coiled. But before he could roar his challenge, Dr. Holt placed a calming hand on his shoulder and closed his eyes. An almost imperceptible hum rippled through the air. The wolves paused, heads cocked, as Holt's sixth sense, a subtle energy field, extended comfort rather than threat. Slowly, the pack backed away, melting into shadows. Adrenaline still thrummed in their veins as Carrick exhaled. "I thought we were done for." Jin's voice wavered, but her stylus glowed with excitement. "That power, it's incredible." Saran nodded, jotting notes in her slate. Their relief was short-lived. A sudden crack echoed behind them, massive branches snapping under immense weight. They spun to see a towering figure step from the trees, a skinwalker, its gnarled limbs draped in matted moss, horns curving like ancient keys. Its hollow eye sockets glowed with something older than hunger. Miss Riki drew a deep breath, tail bristling. "Form up," she commanded, voice unwavering. Jean and Saran sprinted to the shuttle's storage bay for electronets. Yura readied her scanner rifle. Carrick flexed every muscle, ready to shield them. Holt's eyes shone with calm determination. As the monstrous silhouette advanced, they stood together on that foreign soil, teacher and students united by purpose. The forest held its breath, and in that charged moment, every lesson they had learned mattered more than their fear. Moonlight filtered through the towering redwoods, casting elongated shadows that stretched like ghostly fingers across the forest floor. The skinwalker loomed at the edge of their makeshift camp, its grotesque silhouette draped in moss and fungus, horns curved like scythes. Its hollow eye sockets glowed faintly with ancient hunger. Miss Riki Zamara squared her shoulders. "Form a perimeter," she ordered, voice steady despite her pounding heart. Yura Vex snapped her scanner rifle to stun mode, the barrel humming with charged particles. Carrick Talos positioned himself on the tallest stump, claws flexed, ready to pounce. Jean Mirik and Saran Ipel moved to secure the shuttle's electronets and power conduits. The creatures stepped forward, each footfall soft yet resonant, like bones clicking in the dark. It let out a low, echoing moan that made the fur along Carrick's spine bristle. Yura fired a stun dart, but it passed through the skinwalker's ectoplasmic form, dispersing into motes of green light. "It's phased," Saran exclaimed, eyes wide behind her microlenses. "Standard weaponry can't touch it." Miss Riki's fronds quivered with focused intent. She raised both claws and closed her eyes, reaching into the mind link while she'd honed under Dr. Holt's guidance. The forest stilled, as if even the wind awaited her command. With a mental push, she projected a wave of calm resolve toward the skinwalker, anchoring it for a heartbeat. "Now," she yelled. Jean Mirik slammed the electronet trigger. Sheets of crackling energy enveloped the beast, constricting it like a living cocoon. It howled, a sound of bone and shadow, its limbs thrashing against the pulsing mesh. Yura advanced, planting a resonance beacon at its base. "Anchor point set," she called. Carrick leapt down, metal-toothed claws glinting. He drove one curved talon into the net's control pad, severing the override circuits that had kept the skinwalker rampant. Saran keyed her slate to record every moment. The beast convulsed, the moss falling away, and with one last shuddering moan, it dissolved into a harmless swirl of motes that drifted into the night. Silence enveloped the clearing. Only the muffled hum of the shuttle's auxiliary generator remained. The students stared at where the skinwalker had stood, disbelief and awe mingling on their faces. Miss Riki exhaled, lowering her claws. "You did it," she said, pride and relief coloring her tone. "Together." Dr. Holt's voice crackled through the comlink. "Transmission channel open. Send the data now." Saran uploaded the electronet schematics, the resonance beacon coordinates, even the MindLink logs of Miss Riki's psionic anchoring. Jean encrypted the file with human and Confederation keys. Yura pressed transmit with a satisfied click. As they watched the progress bar inch toward completion, a distant chime sounded, confirmation of receipt in the Council's secure archives. The galaxy's most powerful tribunal could no longer deny the evidence. Earth's true dangers, the internal conspiracy, and the alliance forged between human and Zamara led team. Carrick exhaled in a deep, rumbling growl. "We've changed the narrative." Jean Mirik smiled, triangular head tilted back. "They'll have to listen now." Miss Riki gathered her students in a circle beneath the redwood canopy. "Remember this moment," she said softly. "You faced the impossible, and you prevailed. Our program stands for truth, unity, and the courage to confront our fears." Above them, the branches swayed in a gentle breeze. The forest, once a deadly unknown, now felt like an ally. They had not only survived Earth's challenges, they had proven that knowledge and solidarity could overcome even the darkest conspiracies. And somewhere in the halls of the Confederation, Counselor Than's smirk faltered as he realized the Earth program would endure, and that its champions would never be silenced.